So, welcome back to this fireside chat. We are happy to already have here a full round on stage for you, and we gonna start into it in a bit. We are super happy to have already quite an interactive morning. We started with a keynote and main panel. You have been in workshops and very engaged right now at the online booth as well. And now we have actually a very exciting fireside chat where we go into climate neutrality and beyond. So in the morning, we have been already touching on climate transformation, the political frameworks, but now we have three experts in our moderator Yvonne joining to really go into their experiences and unpack the whole topic. And we have Yvonne, first of all, with us. You see her picture. Actually, we have a little bit an issue to get the camera going, but I think her picture looks amazing. And most of you have probably met her all around. So maybe in virtual, a round of applause for her to stay in line and bring her moderating voice. So on her side, it's more a podcast, I would say. But before I hand over to Yvonne, I would quickly like to introduce and honor her from my side. So we are super happy to have Yvonne, as she is a chairwoman of B.A.U.M e.V. and a leading partner of the summit as well. And she's an expert in climate actions, but also in climate measurement and all the regulation frameworks that are coming up. Not only because she's also part of an advisory group for the EFRAG. And beside her work in climate transformation and sustainability reporting, she's amazing in leading networks and building bridges between innovators and companies. And therefore, she brings forward the mission of I'm wrong in that. I would say maybe a climate-friendly economic, that I can say better. And is a leading expert in sustainability practices. So with that, I would say, Yvonne, welcome on stage. We are happy to have you. How are you doing?
Pretty fine, thank you, Lara. So it's a question of nerves sometimes if you deal with technical devices. And so am I today, because I traveled from Leipzig to Hamburg today, because we have a satellite event this evening also here in the Hamburg Harbor. And just yesterday, we had a huge conference in Leipzig with 250 attendants on sustainable finance and transformation finance for environmental friendly, but also just transition in general, if we consider the sustainable development goals. Yes, and as such, I'm very happy to host this session today. Climate neutral and beyond is the topic. And we want to elaborate how climate strategy is connected to corporate sustainability strategy from a broader perspective. And we will find out challenges with you together, the audience, but also the experts, the panelists, the exquisite panel that we have composed today. And we'll find out best practices, how climate can be integrated into sustainability management as a whole. And we have an hour to do that. And if you allow me, Lara, I will directly jump into this session. And I suggest... Sorry? Thumbs up.
You're more than welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And the speakers today are, and I start with our men, Steffen Kück, Lead Communication Advisor at Orsted, a company which we will visit also later on in Dockland in Hamburg. Sabine Schellander, Co-Head of Sustainability of GREINER AG. And Paula Caballero, she is Regional Managing Director of the Nature Conservancy and the inventor of the Sustainable Development Goals. And we discussed earlier on that we will start with that holistic perspective as the initial point, because it is such an honor to have you today here, Paula, because we know each other since some years when you visited Germany for a peer review of the German sustainability strategy, and you shared a lot of experiences, perspectives, and views upon that, how we are dealing with that here in Germany, embedded into the European Union. And as we see, we are now halfway to fulfill the Agenda 2030, at least on a time scale. We should talk about that first, maybe, because this is also setting the scene a bit for, in terms of pressure, ambitions, and what you observe, what's happening. Is it sufficient enough, yes or no? So when the Sustainable Development Goals were invented, you have been the Director of Economic, Social and Environmental Affairs at the Colombian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And that is something that I find very interesting, because it has been the middle management, so to say, in public administration. And that was your role to co-invent that with others together, that spectacular new concept, which is the complete opposite as it is perceived also in general public. Because when we see, I've been to Saxony yesterday, there are some regions where the Sustainable Development Goals, for example, are considered to be a kind of, woke politics. And since the adoption of 2015, we try to describe what the revolutionary approach was of then. So the opening question for you would be, if in an interview you said that the Sustainable Development Goals are revolutionary, being a blueprint for breaking with a status quo, do you consider we take them yet serious enough?
Thank you. And first of all, I want to thank the organizers of the Climate Transformation Summit for inviting me today, and my fellow panelists and yourself, Yvonne, for inviting me to be on this particular panel. So thank you, and thanks to everybody who's joining us today. The question you ask is very pertinent, because I think that the SDGs have an enormous promise of transformation.
I can't hear her alone anymore, right?
And that developed countries only join in addressing these issues by providing resources or support. But when we look at issues like trade flows, climate change, things like the pandemic that just happened, we start to really realize how interconnected we are. And when you also see some of the very salient problems that developed countries are facing right now, on many fronts, you start to realize that development is really a spectrum along which different countries find themselves in different moments and in different phases. But we all, every single nation in the world, has to tackle its development issues, both individually as well as collectively at regional and global level. So the SDGs were the first that called for a universal agenda, that proposed a global agenda where everybody had to act. And that was in itself revolutionary. I think something else that was revolutionary about the SDGs, and looking at the panel that's joining me today, was that it was an agenda that was actionable outside of the UN, outside of only government. It was an agenda that for the first time really made sense and could be translated into the business plans of private sector. And I mean private sector all the way from multinationals down to small farmer associations. So that was also, that inclusivity was important. The SDGs are also revolutionary because they talked about breaking the silos. We talk about a water target or an agriculture target or an industrial output target without realizing what the trade-offs and the synergies are between issues and between sectors. And that siloed mentality is a lot of the reason that we have so many problems and so many crises that were interrelated crises that we're facing today. So just very briefly, I will only highlight this, but that's at the heart of the SDGs, this idea of profound, integrated, participatory integration for a global universal agenda. Now, you ask me, are we living up to the SDGs? And in a word, I would like to say, not really. Many organizations, many local governments, national governments have adopted the SDGs, but they adopt them and then they keep implementing them with the same business as usual mentality. What are the water targets and what are the energy targets? And so it's not looking at that deep integration. And another really, really big fallacy that we have is somehow a sense that we have until 2030. We have until. And that is the biggest falsehood possible. It's really a deception. It's a mirage, because The only thing that matters is what we do today. And if we all think that we can wait for some of these actions until 2029 and somehow deliver on 2030, it's not going to happen. It is right now where we have to put in place the kind of design and implement financial mechanisms for whatever it is, financing the transformation, greater access to finance, development of more innovative instruments. TNC, the Nature Conservancy where I work, is doing incredible work, for example, around sovereign debt swaps. Those take a lot of time. Anything that you do that is going to generate change and impact by 2030 has to start now. What kind of enabling environment is needed for businesses to really shift? What kind of enabling environment is needed to really be able to drive the kind of market transformation that we need? How do we change consumer choices? The heart of the SDGs is really SDG 12, sustainable consumption and production. I ask all the private sector on the panel and who's joining us today in the audience, how long does it take for a private corporation to change its business practices? How long does it change to change the mindsets before you even change the practices? So on the market side, on the policy side, on the finance side, on the production side, on the consumption side, that takes time. But we think that we announce things. We have a COP. How many COPs and global events do we have? And we make all sorts of fantastic announcements. And then we walk away and nothing really happens. But we've announced and we feel very good about it. And so that's a bit the reality with the SDGs. We announce them, we say, we hold them up, but then we keep implementing exactly the same way we have done before. So that revolution needs revolutionary implementation. I wrote a book about how complicated the SDGs were to get them to happen so that people understand that this isn't just like a normal evolution, that the SDGs didn't pop out of the UN, that it was a huge global battle because nobody wanted that revolutionary idea. And now with that same impetus and with that same fight, we've got to figure out how to implement them in a revolutionary and in a different way. I end my book with a quotation from Nelson Mandela. It's impossible until it happens. And that's what we have to think. If we look about what is possible, what we're used to, where our comfort zone is, we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. And the trends keep going like that, or emissions keep going like that. So how do we actually change our mindset about how we even understand, how we even explain to ourselves, what are the problems? Because there's another saying, if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And if we already come with our pre-cooked solutions, we're just going to keep banging around, trying to implement the same things and not bring about the transformation and the disruption. And proof that we don't know how to do it is the pandemic. It said, never waste a good crisis. Well, we just wasted a massive global crisis, completely wasted. We talked about green recovery and it didn't happen. But the pandemic showed us both the scale of the disruption that is needed and how resilient human beings are, our economies and our societies. So we should take that as to increase our appetite for risk and for disruption and to realize that we can push the boundaries, that we must push the boundaries. On climate, the energy transition is much further ahead in the sense that there's more of a sense of looking to 2050, doing the backcasting and really understanding what are the pathways for that energy transition. We need the same for land use, for health, for all other sectors. So the answer short is yes, the SDGs are revolutionary, but only if we implement them in a revolutionary way.
What I love a lot is that this session is recorded because this clearly shows this is a first-hand wake-up call to come into action. Paula, many thanks for this because it was really a stand-up speech. I consider that as such. And I think we can directly type it down and publish it again. And one question was which book it was. So I will share the link later on, Carmen, because it is a book which hardly can be ordered here in Germany. I tried it several times, but maybe if you are in another world region, you are happier than I am. And it is for sure pretty readable and worth reading, because it is so anti-colonialistic and so anti-imperialistic as it can be, because it was coming and initiated by another world region where it is the bottom-up perspective for how we can become sustainable in our developments. And you said business as usual mentality, and that was something that we have discussed yesterday as well in our transformation finance event that we had in Leipzig. What do we have to do today? Appetite for risk and disruption. This is something that's really empowering to bring this all together, because also diagnosing where we bounce back to business as usual lobbying, for example, business as usual thinking, financing with subsidy structures, etc. We see that we have those blockades, and even in international cooperation by politics, for example, we see that the organizations which are profiting from it are a bit fed up because they see that it is so limited. So the perspective shifts towards investment into fair and just interconnectedness also from business and business partners worldwide. If we want to break it up from a practical perspective, what would you say, which questions should we ask to break that business as usual mentality up and to disrupt those kind of discussions that we have day to day, where we see that the major lobbyist groups are not pro-serious sustainable development, pro-innovative creative thinking and market design, for example, because that's the context where we are all working now?
Yvonne, it starts at the individual level, and this is what makes it really hard. I have an amazing, remarkable team at TNC, the Latin America team, and we're embedded in an organization that has incredible leadership, incredible vision, incredible values, and has a deep commitment to transformation and to really shifting how we work. And we work around the world. We have offices in Europe and around the world. And I see how much we have to struggle every day with all of that impetus, with the incredible technical muscle that we have, with the absolute commitment at all levels to transformation and to really bringing around these really massive big shifts. We struggle every day to make sure that we're not falling back into business as usual mentality, that we're not reaching for our hammers, that we're really asking much more difficult and probing questions, that we're not looking at just root causes, but at the interactions between root causes. And we find again and again and again that we fall back into that comfort zone. So the answer is that we have to, if we really want to shift, we have to, one, be able to look at the kind of disruption we want and to do planning processes, to do the strategizing and the strategy development processes with an eye to that disruption and asking ourselves the difficult questions of why have not things changed? What needs to change? And what is not possible, as I said, but what is needed? And I think for a lot of private sector, many companies have made a shift and some years ago adopted corporate social responsibilities and are now moving into ESG frameworks. We'll have to go much beyond that. It really has to be about transforming business plans. And at TNC, that's what we're looking to do. We work with small farmers, we work with indigenous peoples, but we also work with huge multinationals across the world and around the world. We are a very good partner of corporations that really do want to make that shift. But we see how difficult it is. But there has to be that commitment on the part of corporations of understanding, of being willing not to change, but to understand that the long-term return on investment is predicated in this global world with increasing degradation, not of environmental resources, but of those essential resources on which our long-term growth is predicated. Being willing and being able to revisit the return on investment and understand that when you have that short-term vision of just short-term gain for yourself, for your company, for your sector, that is where we're locking in pathways that are going to lead us to completely unsustainable from an economic, a financial, a political, a social, and an environmental space. But it really has to be about where we meet ourselves and the willingness that we open to understand and to look at the world differently. Because otherwise what we do is you take the SDGs, put them up on a wall, put them into your business plan, put them into your corporate. It all looks really good. You have a lot of little round circles with a lot of little colors. Yay, we're doing it. Or you go to a COP and you stand on a panel and you're all with the big boys and the big girls and you say all these great things, or at Davos, and everybody looks and feels very important and very intense. And then nothing happens because we've just predicated and said and announced, but we haven't done the homework. And the homework begins at home. The homework begins in looking at what is the mindset with which we're saying that we're going to work on this or change this or shift that. And deep down, we don't want to change. Deep down, there's a lot of comfort, a lot of inertia, and a lot of incumbency. So looking ourselves in the mirror is a really, really good first step as individuals, as corporations, as government, as a global society.
Thank you so much. So it's an individual responsibility to show commitment, to have an attitude towards sustainable development, and a strong will to look on the long-term profitability also in a multi-capitalistic way, which is pretty evolving right now. Thank you, Paula. So a very good example we will see now with Steffen Kück, who made, not as a person, but as a company, a very impressive transformation as a Danish oil and natural gas company, becoming a wind park and renewable markets infrastructure company in 1 decade. And that is something I found astonishing while I did my research and read a bit through the company site. And yeah, we would like to look a bit on the beyond part now of climate and climate neutral and beyond. So Paula already mentioned we have the decorative SDGs, sometimes also in the company reports. How do you deal at Orsted with the SDGs in your sustainability strategy?
Yeah, first of all, also hi from my side. Good to be here again after last year's premiere. I hope I can live up a bit to Paula's right standards for sure in terms of what we did as a company. The SDGs, I guess, saying that also for many other companies out there, are basically a basis for what we did, especially in the beginning when you look at what is important in terms of sustainability. And we as an energy company specifically also, of course, had in mind to combat climate change. So SDG 13 is probably the one where we had the most leverage to do something about. We have about 19 programs now when it comes to sustainability, and at least 4 of them try to focus on that combating of climate change. So SDGs were a basis of that. But as Paula also mentioned, that's the beginning, right? And you need to create this awareness of what are the topics that are important for you to go through a transition, to go through a business transformation, but it then also plays a big role of how you act. And what we did is try to really change this way of how we look at our business, and not just take some sustainability goals and put them on top of what we do already, but as we just heard before, really intrinsically change our business, meaning that we looked at each other about 10, 15 years ago and said, is that what we're doing right now really the way for the future to go? And from different angles, mind you. So not just from, okay, we have a societal problem, climate change is something that influences us all. I mean, that's kind of also like a certain moral compass you may have as a person, as a company, hopefully, but also from a sheer business perspective. And that I want to also emphasize on, which is very important here, that what we just heard, this whole long-term goal of staying competitive, being a resilient company. And in the late 2000s, we were at a point where we were not seeing that anymore, being a company that were heavily relying on fossil fuels, and thought about the fact that this is not the way how our portfolio can look like in the future. So what we did was basically saying we need to get rid of that business, phase out of that business, not just with small steps, but very focused. We took a lot of effort in developing a technology, offshore wind at that time, which hasn't been matured, and we were really willing as a business to say we go into that. And we heard before, leadership was very important. Also saying that for us, I cannot understate how important leadership is. A leadership that is not just looking at sustainability as this fancy thing you kind of need to do because your shareholders or whoever expects it from you, but also because you are personally certain that that is the right thing to do. And we were lucky, I guess you can also call it luck, to have at least two of the last, and certainly also our current CEO, to be at that forefront. You know, to come into a business and say, sustainability is something we need to ingrain in what we do. And I'm repeating myself here, but not just use it as a blueprint and put it on something existing, but consider sustainability in everything you do. And I hope, or I'm pretty confident to say that we are at that point nowadays. But yeah, it took us about 10 to 15 years, and it was certainly not an easy path. That's also something maybe to underline here. It takes commitment, a word we also have used, a mindset. Certainly, you need to take the people on board. But if you are then on this journey, which we are still on, you see a lot of dynamic that is kind of, I don't know, naturally developing in your company, because the people you have on board already, or the people you hire, are really willing to be part of this journey, which is a driver in itself and creates so much change. And so this whole relying on business as usual is not even a consideration anymore if you have so many people that are willing and want to make a change. So that was kind of our last 10 years, or yeah, maybe a bit more than that now, what made the change. Yeah.
And if you should mention the major success factors, because we heard so several right now. So I would derive focus, for example, or leadership. Was it also leadership by the organization, or was it really the individual perspective and leadership?
Individual, organization, internal factors, external. I mean, how much time do we have? But I guess mentioning a couple of points. When we made this decision, and I mentioned the business point of view played a big role in that, we had external opposition. So shout out to those people who went out there back in the day in Germany, for that matter, and said we don't want any more coal power plants in Germany. So that was something that as back then Orsted, or Dong Energy, was a Danish company coming into Germany, wanting to do that, and there was a huge public opposition. That's one point. Also, the change in leadership, having a new way of thinking about how to build out a business, that was another point. Also, ingraining that into your organization, making sure that whatever you do as a manager is considering sustainability, and maybe even to the point where your KPIs are linked to sustainability, which is, I guess something progressive to do, or something that is not given in many companies, but that also creates this link where even when someone, and you can't expect 100% of your employee base to always be 100% behind it, but even if they are not convinced yet, you can make sure to convince, put it that way. So yeah, internal factors, external factors. We were also lucky that we were front runners in making that change, but we also came into a period of time where timing was certainly right. I mean, the whole development of offshore wind, if we look at it now, it's seen as a major staple of the German energy transition and also worldwide. So seeing the need for that technology, seeing the, I mentioned shareholders being quite interested in investing in green companies. So then having these proof points already obviously gave us an advantage. So yeah, it was certainly a mix of internal and external factors. And we were, looking back at this, I guess, a bit surprised about our success, without kind of patting us on our back too much. But when we said we need to switch to green energy, we were expecting to do so by 2040, somewhere around then, because we weren't even we had no idea how fast it could go. And now in 2 years, we will basically be climate neutral when it comes to our own operations. So it took us maybe 15 years, what we expected to take us twice the time. Just emphasizing on, if you really focus on it and if you really put all your effort behind it, it can accelerate very quickly and kind of grow exponentially in a way. Maybe a slow start, certainly some down times also, and some very dire times, certainly. But then if it really works, and we were confident it would, then it at one point just accelerates and exponentially grows, and we came to the point of climate neutrality, or will come to that point way quicker than expected.
Thank you. So maybe the coherency from the inside, internal transformation, and the external was kind of the speeding up factor even, and then again a reason for public appreciation. Maybe we can sum it up like that. So Steffen, I would like to draw your attention to one or two questions, or one question which is in our Q&A section. How actually does management at Orsted include SDG related topics in daily business? Maybe you can answer to that. While we proceed with our dialogue and take on stage and into focus Sabine Schellander, co-head of sustainability at GREINER AG. So, and now in my research on your website, I was very happy to be addressed directly as Teresa, because you write there, or GREINER writes there, hello progress, all for the future. So that is something enthusiastic, which speaks also of very positive attitude. And what we find and what is written there is that you are one of the world's leading supplier of plastic and foam solutions. That you are in packaging, furniture, sports, and automotive industries. That you use medical technology and medical and pharmaceutical sector. And that you have been founded 1868 in Nürtingen in Germany and are still a family-owned company. So that's maybe already one of the success factor to have a long-term perspective in your plan, and the plan is called Blue Plan. What is it?
So yeah, hi, also from my side. Thanks for having me here, and it's going to be really tough now after all the great things Paula and Steffen just said and mentioned. And I was like, I wanted to like clap my hands and cheer here, because thank you for all these really like important messages. But yeah, coming back to GREINER and the plastics industry, which per se is not an easy industry, especially if we talk about sustainability or incorporating sustainable, or so the SDGs. And I just got a little bit of sad when I was listening to the others, because I would love to tell you that we already made it and we already successfully transformed our business model. Unfortunately, I have to admit that we are not there yet. But I just heard from Paula that only the things matter which we do now and today. So you pretty much have to take care that we don't look too much in the future, because that what could happen then is that targets might be or seem to be unachievable. Yeah? So that we are not getting frustrated and motivated here. But sorry, Yvonne, you wanted to talk about the Blue Plan. So the Blue Plan is our company or group-wide sustainability strategy. And it's referring to the color blue, so which is the color of our logo, but also to the color of our planet, and thus meaning that we need to save the planet and that we need to transform our business to be able to do so. So that's where the name comes from. And I think the interesting part about our strategy or the Blue Plan itself is that it's built on 3 pillars. And we also, Paula and Steffen, were talking about interconnecting things and the interconnection between certain areas and also players, stakeholders. So this is what we focused on when we set up or developed our strategy, that we said, okay, we need to work on 3 pillars here, which are circularity, climate and decarbonization, obviously, and also the people, because decarbonization, for example, is not going to happen without circularity, without focusing on our raw materials we use, on how we produce, how we design products. And on the other hand, we're not going to be able to drive circularity or decarbonization without the right people, or motivated and well-trained people who have not only the expertise, but also the commitment or the freedom to start thinking big, who can dare, who can be bold, who can really think of new solutions. So we also have to create a framework where we can work in. So this is all about the Blue Plan, and it's also about really like moving hearts and minds. And I think this is also something Paula addressed already. So it's about changing the mindset, and then hopefully everything else will follow.
And I saw that you have operations in over 30 countries, 11,000 people working for you. So that's already a big stakeholder group in itself. And I was wondering, how are you going into stakeholder dialogues in so many countries? Because if we consider the sustainable development goals and taking them serious, I would imagine that you need 30 sustainability strategies for GREINER. How are you doing?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the first and probably most easiest thing to do is travel and speak to people. So I'm really trying to be on the road. I really try to visit all the production sites, although this is not working because we have many. We have over 60 production sites and over 130 or 100 something entities worldwide. But it's really about talking to the people, interacting with them. As I said, like changing their minds, especially moving their hearts also, and telling them, giving them a reason, giving them a why, telling them a story. And then obviously you need to talk, you need to address stakeholders with certain topics. So you need to think of whom am I going to tell what? Because if you just address all of the topics we need to work on, and if you have to tell them, okay, listen, 2030, we need to do this, that, and this, and that, and that, and this, you're going to probably lose the people because they're going to be so overwhelmed that they will stop doing anything. So it's always about also, you have to really think of the messages you share with whom. So this is one part. Obviously, I mean, there are so many regulations out there. There's so much stuff the European Union is working on. We have CSRD coming up. We have CS-DDD coming up. There, the packaging and packaging waste regulation, which is obviously very important for us as a plastic manufacturer. So you also have all these like laws and regulations. You have the SDG as a framework. Yeah, we have our own strategy, our own targets. We have our values we're working on. So there's so much stuff going on and so much messages we need to spread only within the company. Yeah, but also we need to interact with other stakeholders, like external stakeholders. So that's pretty much explaining what I'm doing the whole day, talking to people, doing some translational work here, trying to slice the elephant. I don't really like that term, but it suits very well here. And on the other side, I mean, I think Paula addressed it in her initial speech where she said, okay, we also need to change the mindset or consumer behavior. Yeah. We're plastics producers, so I really need to work with our consumers, our end consumers, telling them, okay, listen, if you have this cup, you need to dispose it correctly. Yeah, you need to put it in the right bucket. Yeah, and that sounds easy, but sometimes it's not. We need to convince our customers, to why plastic is not as bad as it's probably going to be transported as a message in the news. Lots of talking, lots of trying to involve or get involved, to involve with or engage with everybody. Sorry, that's the correct term. Also with politicians and engage with everybody along the value chain.
So you embrace the complexity. I see that already.
Yeah.
But coming back to Steffen, who said one of the success factors has been focus, for example, for Orsted, to do that very profound transformational change in the company. Maybe that could even be one of the success factors for GREINER then as well. So just as a hint, because complexity, of course, it paralyzes sometimes. And do you have such a core SDG for your company as well, that only one that is the major SDG for your operations, where you orientate everything towards, just like for Orsted, it's SDG 13, or as Paula said, SDG 12 is the one core SDG in her perspective. Do you have something like that as well? Or do you embrace all 17? You embrace all 17? You're muted, so you're thinking maybe, or maybe tone is away.
Still muted, yes.
I'm not sure if Steffen got that he's the
Sorry, I thought you still wanted to address this to Sabine. I'm sorry. We maybe just to put it into perspective, when I said we have this core SDG 13, that was certainly something we could begin with. Really being an energy company, that's, like I said, where you have most leverage. But now we have much more than that, because throughout the development of our company and throughout the development of our sustainability work, you can then get into areas which haven't been maybe not your focus at the beginning, because you also don't have the resources yet to care about those. I mean, also, again, looking at the audience, mid-sized companies, smaller companies, you can't tackle all of them. So look at maybe one or two you can address at the beginning. But over the years, of course, like I mentioned, we have now 19 programs, and they influence all kinds of levels of sustainability. So that focus on one becomes much more widened, well, over the years. And maybe to get to that question, Yvonne, you asked before we headed over to Sabine, in terms of what we do to kind of enable or encourage our leadership or our management teams. We do try to actually link performance, if you can say so, to sustainability, meaning that we have a so-called short-term incentive saying that we set a certain aspiration for 2030, and how can you as a manager or with your team contribute. And so to also then specifically link your performances, whatever you do, with, for example, the CDP climate score, and say that whatever you do as a team or a department, whatever section you work in, that has actually some sort of scientific basis for KPIs behind it. And so it's a combination of like sustainability KPIs, a climate score. We consider how much can the departments contribute to reducing CO2, which is also then linked to their managers' performance. Again, not all of them, it always depends on which department you're working in, but then maybe others, you can certainly contribute to social sustainability, a field that we have still a lot to do in, quite frankly, and that is something that is kind of our next, or not our next, but something we need to put much more focus and emphasis on. For example, the whole gender equity, gender balance, especially in the energy field, that is still way out of balance. And that is also something managers need to take accountability for, which we want to make sure in their specific KPIs. So yes, focus, specific KPIs linked to sustainability, and last but not least, also creating an awareness for sustainability and for what you do, because you can't expect, and I think I mentioned the term transparency before, you can't expect to have everyone on board. It's such a vast, complex field, sustainability is, and we try to, within our company, also create awareness, transparency, educate actually our people on what we're doing, with also topics that maybe not everyone has any connection to yet, and that could be something, for example, such as protecting biodiversity, which I may say also something about later on. But so it's kind of threefold, I would say, to focus.
Thank you. As we are running out of time, and I would like to give once more to Paula the word, because we had some questions in the Q&As looking on change of mindsets. In all your dialogues, what do you consider to be the nudge towards change of mindsets within the system that we are working, doing business, doing politics in general? Can you give some advice as a very last notion?
Sorry, Yvonne, just under how we change mindsets?
Yes, and what are the success factors to nudge the people to change the mindsets?
Well, I think
how can we incentivize that?
The first is perseverance. It's what Steffen and I think Sabine have alluded to. This doesn't happen overnight. As we say, this is for the big-hearted and the heavy-hearted. This is a long-term battle, a long-term effort, and anybody looking for quick returns and quick results is not going to get them. we have to start, as I said, with ourselves. And if you really hold up that mirror to yourself, you will realize every day how much you yourself are falling back into your old behavior patterns. So it's the question of really being able to interrogate permanently yourself and the systems around you, because you are part of a system. And then there's other systems that you're trying to change, to be able to really interrogate them all the time, to understand what needs to change at its root. What needs to change? How can I shift? The other is that we think that we change mindsets by convincing people. The environment movement has made that mistake for decades. But how can you not care about biodiversity? How can you not care about? And it becomes a sense of my values against your values, and I'm going to convince you somehow that my values are really important, or the way I equate the world and the way I see the world and the way it adds up for me is what matters. And we have to take a step back and meet people where they are and make a business case. I was talking about the return on investment earlier. What is the longer term return on investment? What are the co-benefits? What are other factors within a bigger system that a company or a locality or a community belongs to? What are other co-benefits and other issues around that make part of that bigger system that they're probably not thinking of? That if you put on that SDG lens, you start to see it. But that doesn't happen overnight, and it does not happen by itself. So you need visionaries, you need leadership. And I think what we're missing around the world right now is real leadership, visionary leadership, leadership that perseveres, leadership that can inspire, leadership that can lead.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Can I quickly add something, Yvonne?
Of course. Yes.
Or are we too late already? No, I would like to add something here, and Stefan and Paula addressed it in a way, but I think what's also important is trust. Yeah, I think you really have to tell your people that it's okay. You need to start moving. You need to start shifting your business model, and it's okay that you have no idea how it exactly will work out and how the path looks like. Yeah, so but please start to move, yeah, because as Paula in the beginning said, business as usual it's over, yeah. But to enable people to do so, you need to create trust in the first time, or in the first place, because otherwise, I mean, there will be trial and error phases. Yeah, there will be ideas which will not work towards the solutions we're all looking for. Yeah, but people need to get going, need to start trying, and I think this is also an important topic.
Not only start trying, but do it today.
Yeah, do it, exactly.
What you can do today is, what I would drive out of the last 5 minutes is question yourself, question your organization, question the system, and revise it according to the Sustainable Development Goals for a common future. Thank you for this session. Thank you, Sabine. Thank you, Paula and Steffen. And I hand over to Lara back again.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. I think I had just the honor to hang in a little bit and support. So thanks, everyone, also for joining us live, right? So you can always have some issues, but I think it worked out perfectly. And thank you, Yvonne, for managing us through the session. I think we still have a little bit buffer time. So as I still have all of you on stage, we might want to answer one or two more questions from the audience, if that is fine with everyone. So maybe you can also choose which one you like best, but actually I think there were some that I would love to go into. So I think it was one for Sabine. I can show that on stage. We have been, I think, or at least what I heard out of that session, we talked a lot about engagement of other stakeholders, of going into dialogues, also building trust right now. But that's also something we see in a lot of companies as a huge challenge. So specifically when you talk about transformation from within, you might have all these external stakeholders, you might also have all the internal stakeholders. So maybe really for someone who's starting that whole process right now in the company, can you give like a walkthrough where to start with? So you have your tools like the SDGs, and then you have a business model that's maybe rooted in the last hundreds of years of work. Where do you start getting everyone involved, and how do you really do that transformation process with working with stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think that's a very tough question, to be honest, because I could speak about that for ages, and that's one of my favorite topics, and that's what I usually also do, to talk about barriers, because this is what we need to address here. I think what you should do is what I mentioned before. I mean, think of really slicing the elephant. So think of your value chain, think of your business model, and think of whom you need to get into the boat first. So get rid of the idea that you will address everybody at once and successfully. Because this, in my experience, and I'm working now in sustainability for over 14 years, is not going to be. It's not going to work, and you're going to be frustrated, and you're going to stop. You're going to lose your enthusiasm and then your idealism and whatever you lose. But probably you just lose it. So think of the main, Paula. Do you want to add something? Or yeah, okay. So I think you need to have a clear picture of whom to approach, who are the main ones, and who are probably, where can you build on or create alliances? Get other people into the boat and try them to convince other stakeholders, because you cannot do that on your own. So I think it's about synergies, alliances, and then just be bold. Talk to people, create trust. And it's also about being honest. It's also probably about telling them, okay, listen, I don't have an exact plan how we're going to manage that. But anyway, as you just said, Yvonne, we need to do it. We need to do it now. And I think that's it. Just start.
And if I could just build on what Sabine was saying, I'm 100% in agreement with everything. I would add, though, that you also need to change the risk appetite. And that means that you have to change the incentives within the company, and you have to work to create an enabling environment to de-risk the kind of upstream finance that you need, et cetera, et cetera. So risk can become a huge barrier, because if there's inherent risk aversion because you're used to the business as usual, to the comfort, you have to actively move people so that they know that if they do take that, look at those bold ambitions, everything Sabine was saying, you can do that. Trust is the linchpin of it all. Without trust, you can't go anywhere. But building on that trust, you then have to work actively to change the risk appetite within your company, within your group, within your team, but then across the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for adding on that. And actually, that would have been also a question I would love to hand over to Yvonne as well, because she did such an amazing job in moderating. But I think risk and climate, that's very much a topic Yvonne is so much working in. So maybe what do you see, like where companies are risk averse and how we can help them overcome it? Like, is it collaboration? Is it more knowledge? Is it just doing it? Like, how do you think we can build bridges to really go into actions and be not so afraid and maybe have climate fear stopping us?
Oh, it's not only climate fear, it's fear in terms of nearly everything. Where is risk aversion sourcing? So it's a lot about habits. So again, we have the habits, Paula mentioned it, and others mentioned it as well. If you are into a kind of thinking, the mindset perspective that has been raised in the questions as well, it is also in the spreadsheets of banks, for example, or in the risk management. And what we recognize when it comes to sustainability management in companies, for example, that the term risk as such has a complete other connotation compared to accounting, for example, because there you are working with Excel sheets and very conservative way of thinking and risk management perception, and established in business, also for reasons. But I think the innovation is now not to consider, for example, to set targets in the future as a risk as such. And that was the discussion in the last years when we have established in Europe a sustainability reporting scheme and regulation where accounting firms, for example, told companies it is a risk to set a target in the future because the risk lies within that you don't reach your target. And that is a reputational risk. So how shall we then kick off transformation in business with a plan, do, check, act, management theory, etc., coming into an agile management, because you bounce back again then to the old risk perception in your management or in your board, because you don't have the knowledge, the training, and establish the new habits on looking on your business case and how it has to be evaluated. So that is a very broad issue to raise competencies and to develop competencies, not only theoretical ones, but also in practice, how you can implement that into your daily business. And that is then a communication field again, as Sabine told that. So the biggest and most important stakeholder group, that's your, not only the employees, but your management, your boards, the investors, the loaners, the general public that evaluates what you do. And we see that so many companies are criticized for the bits that they do in sustainability practice and gradually changing their business case. And those companies who are not transforming at all and doing no reports at all and showing no ambitions at all, they are kept calm in the dark. So they are not criticized for not moving and not initiating anything and not doing anything and not questioning whether they have to report publicly. And the companies that are proactive, they claim that we need those public spaces to showcase how companies improve. And I support that very much. We need those public spaces. We need the public data spaces also to generate profit for smaller companies who cannot afford the very costly rating systems, for example, but who are looking for the small and smart solutions that can be managed by themselves, implemented by themselves, and which lays the book of activity into their hands and not externalize again and internalize temporarily, for example, capacities and knowledge into a very short period of time, and then people ride out of the company again and take all the knowledge with them again. So also here I always advertise, look at the small agents for sustainability transformation that just leave all the knowledge that they have in your company, and which you can address at any time when you see now there is a limit again. I want to come into contact with the advisor, with the network partner in the same sector or in another sector that helped you once. And I experienced that the collegiality in the sustainability management sphere is huge.
Great. Yeah. Thank you as well for that speech, I guess. That is really, really nice. We're going to have a lot of content to share afterwards. And yeah, maybe last but not least, maybe Steffen, I think we have talked now about risk, like how to be innovative, changing business models. That's what you said. You're juggling like all these different SDGs. You said you have plans for the futures. Maybe what is the inside perspective from a company, and you can share it, that has been successful already in some points, because yeah, we talked about it. It maybe can be hard to take that risk. What are the 3 things you would say? Why is it worth it to go into transformation? You can make it 1, but up to 3 if you want. What do you feel you share with your board, with your colleagues? What are the reasons why it totally makes sense for a company to go into it now and not see it narrowed, but as a holistic approach to transform the company into a more sustainable direction?
Maybe I can give 2 answers. Just one sentence on the risk aversion or the fear about risk. I think what wasn't really mentioned yet is the whole policy and regulatory framework, which companies such as us also have to work with. Just emphasizing on the fact that there needs to be a certainty a company can rely on. If you cannot expect companies being bombarded with changes every 2 or 3 years, every legislature, that something happens. We need this long-term certainty, and then investments going to be made. Production can be ramped up. All that is, especially for like heavy logistically aspects as we are facing, that's very, very important. Just wanted to say that. So there needs to be a policy behind it. Just for the German viewers, we all saw how fast a LNG terminal was able to be built. No matter what you think about LNG terminals, I guess you have opinions on that. I have too. But it shows like if there is a backup from policy, from politics, from the government, it can happen very fast. And I would hope to see that also for the industries that do something in terms of sustainability. And now I've forgotten your question. Why does it matter, or why is it important to change? I mean, it's always easy to speak from my perspective because we were successful, right? And this is not a given necessarily. But I think I saw somewhere in the chat, when you look at not just as on financials, but holistically, I wouldn't even make a differentiation between that, because if you are successful in your transformation and your sustainability approach, then it will trickle down. I know the term has been used in other ways, but it will trickle down and create a well-run business. There are so many factors which come into play. Us being a hopefully attractive employer, for example, you being a company and standing behind what you're doing brings new people in because they want to work for a company that is leading the change. So that is also a financial gain then, because you get great people and you get the best talents that are out there. Just as a very specific example, how this change can also enable success in other areas, which always leads down to you being a better company, a more competitive one. I used the term resilience before. I think if you ask me what is sustainability about, it's all about resilience and being able to sustain at the market you are in 10 years from now, and not being one of those being left over and being not being able to live up for what is important for the future. So competitiveness, that is what it's all about.
Thank you. We're a little bit over time, but it's good you have the host with you. It's not your fault, it's mine. I would still give Paula the last sentence. Maybe I like to ask in our webinars, if people just forgot everything that was said in the last hour and maybe found it hard to summarize, what was it that you would wish decision makers, employees, people in companies take forward to address the SDGs and take climate actions also forward?
Thank you, Lara. It's a very simple equation. Sustainability means that natural capital, social capital, and economic capital are mutually reinforced and grown. And that is a minimum through your actions, your investments, your products, your policies, whatever it is, you do not grow one at the expense of the other. Ideally, you grow all three together. That's a simple formula that everybody can take away.
Thank you for that, reminding us of the triple bottom line, I would say. And yeah, with that having said, thanks a lot to the panelists. Thanks a lot to Yvonne, everyone.